Hello, my name is Mike Ignatoski, the creator of the Blue Links Hockey Spreadsheet, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to help you conveniently manage your tabletop hockey league project, including the standings, the schedule, but most of all, the player and team stats for your entire league. Blue Links was created to help you get more enjoyment out of your tabletop hockey projects by giving you more time to play the games and look over the stats instead of painstakingly calculating them and entering them into a spreadsheet. In this video, I'm going to cover the main features of what's new in the Blue Links Hockey Spreadsheet version 2.2. So let's take a look. Here's just the kind of list version. Then we'll get into kind of the demonstration of these features. The schedule now has two new things. It has a way to easily look at a historical box score of a game for a historic league. It does require you to be online for that to work. There's also now a way to delete a game you've already played. This is not I don't think will be a very common feature for people to use, but there is a reason or a good case for it to exist also. The leaders, I added a whole new category called single game leaders. There's a new game option to treat overtime losses like a regulation loss as far as the standings go. This is kind of the WHA overtime rule option. This score sheet, if you're tracking plus minus for players on goals, now allows you to add 6 skaters to earn a plus. That it's kind of a bug fix, but it's kind of a feature enhancement also. And there are a few bug fixes in this version that I'll briefly mention. So let's take a look at these things. All right, let's jump in with the features. Let me show the standings here. This is my 1971 Blue Links Demo League of the NHL. And I want to show you the new feature of viewing a box score for a historic game. So this is obviously a historic league, a historic league season. I'm going to go to the schedule. Here it is. You can see these are games I've played. Down here are some games I haven't played. But this is what's new. There's this new yellow box up here that says View Historical Box Score. If I click this, it's a little anticlimactic because it only really shows you the instructions of what you really should do. So it lists a few things. One is this feature is only available for historic leagues, which makes sense. You can have a historic team or league season, but either one works. It does not work for custom leagues because you can't find a custom league box score on hockeyreference.com. So, but to view the historic box score, click the actual score cell for the desired game in column R. So here's column R. Here's the actual or historic scores of the game. So that's where those are. It also mentions the last thing here that the schedule must be locked. And up over here you can see it's locked. So I'm going to look at this, let's say this Red Wings Flyers game. I'm going to now click this cell. And I get a prompt. Do you want to open a browser to view the actual box score for this game? Yes. Oh, it actually opened it on my other sheet. Let me put it here like this. You can see it opened it. Sorry. Let me see if I do another one, if it'll go to the right sheet here. Let's take this Montreal Buffalo game. Yeah. So you can see here, it goes to hockeyreference.com, opens that box score. And this is helpful if you want to see anything about the game, especially who played and who didn't. If that's what you want to use for your replay, you could look at this box score and do with it whatever you want. So that's the first feature of historical box scores, available with a single click on the schedule sheet. While I'm on the schedule sheet, I'll mention there's something else that wasn't on the list because it's kind of a minor thing, but I added this button up here to delete a game result and stats. It's not typically necessary because if you really wanted to replay a game that you did already for some reason, you could always just reload the same game, and then when you finish it, you can save the stats and you'll be prompted to overwrite the prior results. So you can already kind of overwrite your results anyway. But I put this in here because this is a feature that you'd want to use if you're working on a co-op project and you want to import some results from another spreadsheet. Let's say you accidentally played a game in your spreadsheet that somebody else was supposed to play, and you wanted to import those results from the other person's spreadsheet. Then you can't have it it can't be a completed game on your schedule. So this is a way you could delete it from your schedule and from your stat sheets, and then import the results uh, from the other person's spreadsheet. That's why I added this red button up here for delete results. But typically, most people won't use that feature. The next new feature I want to show is the league leaders now have a new category. So I'm going to use my navigator here to go to my stats, my leaders. So I have that same 1971 league here. So here are the leaders, and what's new is that there's this new category for single game leaders. So you still have the skaters and the goalies, and down at the bottom we have the single game leaders. So I'm just going to go back to the top here. I'll click the link to go to the single game leaders. You can see here there's not a lot of categories for the single game, but there's a few for the skaters, a few for the goalies. And another feature in here is that you see these red triangles in the corners. And that means there's a note there. So if you're in the top 3 right now, what you can do is you can hover on that 3. So let's look at the goals and where Phil Esposito had hat trick. If I hover on this, it'll then tell me what game in my league that occurred. So you can see where Pitt Martin had 4 assists in a game, was game 12, etc. So anyway, so there's a few categories for that. For the goalies, there's not a lot other than saves might be the most interesting. In a negative way, it says the most goals allowed, and then there is a time on ice if somebody played a game that had overtime. So anyway, that's the new feature, and this is kind of I'd say a spin-off from the Purple Wolf basketball spreadsheet I made. That was where I first introduced this single game leaders, but I figured Blue Links could also benefit from that feature, so I added it in. So that's single game leaders. Okay, on to the new game option for overtime losses. So here's my standings. Let's first jump to the game options. So if I go to the score sheet setup, game options, down here, option number 10 is the new one where it says treat overtime losses as regulation losses in the standings, like the WHA, which Blue Links user was kind enough to inform me that those overtimes, the losers did not earn a point in the standings. So that's really what this is saying. And I would say typically you're going to set this before you start your league, but hey, if you've already started a WHA league and you want to turn this on, it's available. You can change it anytime you want to. So I'll leave it off for a second. So let's look at my standings. I go to the main standings. Here's the 71 league that I've been using. And if we look at the standings right now, we see that the Blackhawks and the Blues are tied over here with 14 points, and they each have 1 overtime loss. So what I'm going to do now is change that option. So let's go over to the game options, and I'm going to turn this on. So now I am going to treat OT losses as regulation losses, which now means you don't earn a point for losing in overtime. So I'll update my game option. Not that it really affects the score sheet, but let's go back to the standings. But it really kind of activates them in your league. So if I go back to the standings now, it didn't do it yet, but I'm going to recompute the standings now, and it should update this. So when I do that, you'll see now all these OTLs, overtime losses, are 0, and now those the Blues and the Blackhawks that had the 14 and now have 13, just like the Stars and the Seals. And now I could use this one to kind of, if you're going to have that feature activated, you'll probably say, click this button to hide this OTL column because it doesn't really mean anything. So that is the overtime loss game option, or the WHA overtime, is a good way to think about it. One more thing on that overtime loss feature that maybe you've noticed here in this part of the standing, this last 10. This last 10 does still indicate overtime losses. So if you wanted to, you could see here these Blues and Blackhawks, it still shows one in this OTL here, where you'd say wins, losses, ties, and overtime losses. So it does differentiate it here, but it doesn't give you a point for those. So you can kind of see how many games a team lost in overtime, which could be interesting, but standings wise, you don't earn the point. So that's just clarification on that. Okay, the last feature I want to demonstrate is this update and the plus minus, if you're tracking plus minus on goals. So here I have a game with the Red Wings, the Blackhawks, and I just was entering in a goal that the Red Wings scored. So Gordie Howe scores a goal from Delvecchio and Mahavlich. And now if I click the plus minus button down here, I can, if I wanted a case where they had 6, it must have been like they pulled their goalie and brought out Gary Younger as the 6th attacker, let's say, and they scored on the Blackhawks, these 5 guys. But what I want to show is if you say OK here, it gives you this message that says you picked 6 Wings players, but the score sheet doesn't indicate that they pulled the goalie. Do you want to continue? Here I'm going to say no, because it can see down here that the Detroit doesn't have an empty net. So that should be the only way that you could earn a 6 skaters with a plus if you pulled your goalie and had 6 attackers or 6 skaters. So I'm going to say no. In prior versions, it wouldn't let you pick 6 for the plus. But now it does, and thanks to some astute hockey fans that pointed that out to me, that mentioned that it is possible. So can you please update the spreadsheet so it can accommodate this? So that's what this feature is all about. So here I would say no. It is, you can tell here, it doesn't force you. I mean, I try not to enforce too many rules. If you wanted to change your own scorekeeping and say, yeah, I'm going to do it anyways, then that's up to you. But you typically here would say no. So that's how that works. Let me jump out of here a second. So if I did, let's say, pull the goalie, even though let's say I pull the goalie for the Blackhawks since they're losing by 1. So if I go here to put their empty net, switch from pull Tony Esposito for the empty net, yes. And now if they score a goal, I could say that this would be an even strength goal since they pulled their goalie. Let's say Makita scores it from these guys. And then let's add some defensemen here and say, oh yeah, Dan Maloney came in. And these 5 guys get the minus. Now, it allows that. It doesn't give me any flack because they had an empty net, so they could have 6 skaters, and it's all good. I could save it here. If I want to show those plus minus guys, I could see all 6 guys right here. So anyway, that's the correction to the plus minus stat tracking, so you can have a 6 players
earn a plus if you. I'd say you can do it either way, but it's really tries to do some checking for you that and warn you that if you don't have your goalie pulled, it's probably not the right thing to do. But anyway, that's how that feature works. Lastly, as far as the bug fixes go, let me close this up. They were mainly related to the stats. I want to thank BlueLinks user Joe Costa for pointing a couple of these out to me. I really appreciate his feedback to help me get these things tweaked out. But the main culprit had to do with basically games where the goalie was pulled, and this showed up if I look at the statutes on these team goalie game logs. Some of these stats, both on the PK as well as the power play, and I forget maybe goals against that was messing up the goals against average. Sometimes they weren't right. They weren't always wrong, but they could be wrong for games where where there was an empty net situation. So if you look at the this goalie game log, if I look at this by game number here a second, but in these games where you can see the the team pulled a goalie where the empty net had some time on ice, those were the games where sometimes it wouldn't calculate the total goals against or the total power plays correctly. I won't get into the details, but the point is the game log stats were all correct. So now that I've got this, I think this bug fixed, that now those team goalie stats will be correct. And one other, I guess, feature kind of bug fix was on the league leaders. Let's see, it was also, yeah, on the actual leaders, in the goalie leaders, um, it wasn't properly applying the requirements for goals against average or save percentage for what goalies qualified. Up here is where it stated the rule, but it really wasn't applying that properly. So it was probably one of the first cases of the documentation being ahead of the code. But I believe that's corrected now. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to talk about in this new version 2.2. A handful of features, a few bug fixes, and hopefully this will make your BlueLinks experience more enjoyable.
Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. And like Red Green says, keep your stick on the ice.